Hello, welcome to part 2 of this special University of Brighton podcast with the University Alliance. I'm Richard Newman, and in this second part, Brighton's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Debra Humphris, also the Chair of UA, and the Group's Chief Executive Officer, Vanessa Wilson, will talk through what needs to happen to the sector going forward and the part universities will play in the UK's recovery post-COVID. So let's kick off with that. Early stages really, since we found out about the roadmap, and it comes with a lot of conditions. We have prospective dates. We can look forward with some optimism now, which is really encouraging. And we can look now as well at how universities will come out of this, for one, and the contributions that unis will make. We'll come to that bit in just a moment. But I just want to touch on the state of unis as they are at the moment. There is a perception that all universities are cash rich, that they don't need any support, but like all institutions, the sector's been hit hard by the pandemic. Many were struggling before it, and it's obviously been so tough for students to adapt, change what to expect from their university experience. What's it been like for unis too, Debra?
Yeah, at Brighton, we have, as with every university, we lost all of our summer income, where we used to let out our accommodation. We lost all of our conferencing income. We have given the students who are in halls of residence a 60% rebate on term 3. So there's a huge chunk of income from others. You know, you have to diversify your income sources. There's a huge chunk of income that we lost. It's just gone. And we've invested in all our COVID safe arrangements. We've invested in digital kit for students. We did all the distribution of kit, rightly so, to staff in their own homes, to give them the kit and the facilities to be able to work from home. So that's had a real economic impact on the accounts. I think as in all things in university land, there is a distribution curve. There are some universities who do have considerable savings, and we probably could all name them if we wouldn't have to try hard to do that. But there are also universities who will be coming under the scrutiny of the restructuring regime in the DFE. That's not the University of Brighton, because we've been incredibly careful and thoughtful about the management of our accounts and our finances. I mean, there are students back in March last year, when we were doing the work to look at what would be the impact of no international students turning up. You know, huge chunk of income, and there are universities who are hugely dependent on very large numbers of international students, and those students didn't turn up, or they may have done the first part online and they're still not turning up because now you can't get in, essentially. So yeah, everybody's been impacted differently, and I think as an institution at Brighton, we've been incredibly, the finance team are just, you know, they have risen to this like nobody else could possibly have done. They're so proud of them. And we've got difficult decisions to make in the future, but so will everybody. What's it like across the UA, Vanessa?
Yeah, no, very similar. I mean, I think my assessment, and we have worked really close with the finance director, so I've seen the figures, the loss of income, and then obviously the expenditure comes to some eye-watering figures. And certainly we gave an aggregate to this department to see the picture. I mean, I think the University Alliance members they are well positioned actually for all the reasons that Debra said, in terms of we're very well run institutions. You know, have been careful. It has been a challenge, but they have been able to navigate it through without compromising on the quality of teaching and learning, and have been able to make their campuses extremely COVID safe and secure, which has come out in the SAGE report, and the evidence they found to say that on-campus transmission has been extremely low across the piece. It's interesting. I think one of the big issues, and we did highlight this, was, you know, the funding of higher education. It's an interesting one because there's a lot of cross subsidisation that happens and has to happen in order to do the things that universities need to do. And as Debra rightly pointed out, different types of universities will need to do that cross subsidisation through different sources of income. And depending on where that comes from, and because of what COVID has done, it has hit in different places. So if you're highly dependent on your international student income and they didn't come, then it puts you at in a difficult position, and which is why we saw last summer a bit some sort of some behaviours within the sector, let's call it like that, which, you know, where that became a threat, the domestic market became prime target, and we had all that sort of unconditional offer making. Interesting. I mean, I don't. We probably were going to go on to this, but I think clearly the demographics play a big part in this. We are at our lowest point in terms of that sort of 18 to 24-year-old market, and it now moves up. The tick goes up, and that is an opportunity for universities to be able to, over time, plan to settle the books. And the biggest threat, therefore, comes from what government does next in terms of policy, and that might, that might unsettle things, because clearly universities can plan ahead, that if they can trust that those students will come, they can settle. But if the government does anything now, and we are expecting moves, that could really upset things. And that's where, as a group, lobby group, we need to really fight hard to say don't.
So we've had the interim response to Auga. I mean, the Auga's been sitting there for 3 years, waiting for government to reply, and we've had an interim. So we're still working in an environment where there's a whole set of assumptions which remain provisional until government make a decision. Should
we at this point, Debra, should we just summarise very briefly sort of where we're at in terms of sort of people that maybe don't know about government policy and recommendations and reviews and stuff? Would one of you just like to give a very brief state of play as to where we're at and what we're waiting for, just for the people that don't know?
Shall I go?
Yeah.
Right. So we talk Auga. I remember when I joined University Alliance in March 2019. Everyone kept talking about Auga. I was like, well, who is this Auga? But the official name is the Post-Education and Funding Review. And the funding, the F part of this, is probably the most important. And it was commissioned primarily because of this demographic uptick. So if you look at the graphs of our people coming into the 18th year, it massively rises. And clearly there's a cost element to that, to which the Treasury clearly have got their eyes on, because there's a cost to government, to the taxpayer, of funding that. If, depending on what figures you go to, let's say we have 50% of our 18 to 24-year-olds go to university, which I think is a fantastic thing. But there's a cost, and it now sits, because of Treasury accounting rules, it sits on the loan, the debt, the government debt, and they're quite concerned about that. So they commissioned a review, Sir Philip Auga, and to look at that and look at all aspects of what happens at that point in people's education. And they've just literally forensically looked at every aspect, the costs, the fees, courses, the types of courses, the length of courses, and the value, the return to the student, the return to the taxpayer, and then made a set of recommendations. And some of them we I think as a sector we applauded, so particularly the investment into further education, but there were other elements that horrified us, and they looked at reducing the tuition fee, looking at minimum entries to university, looking at removing the foundation year, really did make some quite bold recommendations, and particularly looking at what sort of types of courses, whether or not they should be reduced and entry should be reduced, particularly around creative arts. So there's some things in there which were quite concerning. And just in the end of January, we got a response from government to some of those, some of which they're going to take forward, others potentially not. And we wait for the big money ones for the spending review, which I guess I think we'll think it's the autumn. That will be announced next week, I guess, with the budget. But
Yeah,
the other thing to balance this as well is, because we're talking all about students, is the one thing that I think everybody really welcomed was the government's commitment to research and enterprise. Yeah. So the commitment to 2.4% of GDP. I mean, obviously GDP is reduced a bit in the short term, but the commitment to UKRI and through the Universities Alliance, we've had some really great conversations with the new Chief Executive of UKRI about where she wants to see research investment, and she's absolutely looking beyond the usual suspects, which is great, because across all our universities we have really great applied research, and in terms of economic and social recovery, research, if nothing else, the vaccine has proven the extraordinary value of research and the research community to transform our world. So I hope coming out of this, the government has a far stronger, I'm sure they will with Ottoline Laser, a far stronger appreciation of the importance of having research and applied research in our universities.
So my question really from here is having listened to all that, the review was commissioned by a former Prime Minister. Since then, we've had a change of Prime Minister, so there's going to be change of agendas as well. The manifesto is going to be different. Then we didn't know whether Brexit was actually going to happen. Brexit has happened. We've left. There's a deal that's been done. It's all sorted, and maybe being reopened up again. And then we've got a global pandemic as well. So the world, the landscape in those couple of years has completely changed. So maybe I'm sort of wondering what your thoughts are as University Alliance, really, and a lobbying group. What do you do to say to the government, all these things in this review, or maybe some of the recommendations that you're taking on board don't apply maybe to what the world looks like going forward? How do you think that? I don't know whether I'm just putting words into your mouth there. Is that something that needs to be considered?
Yeah, and it's something, we have really good dialogue and channels into government. That's part of our job, is to meet regularly with senior officials. So the senior official that is responsible for higher education, who then will make recommendations to the Minister and the Secretary of State, who has that dialogue with Treasury. So we meet with them very regularly. We have an open door to them at Department of Education, but also in the business department, as Debra described, for the research side. And that conversation is continuously around, lobbying for those aspects of the recommendations which we don't agree with, and providing the evidence as to why, and increasingly why they're not going to work. For me, it's about destabilising the sector. What the government needs to do is protect this sector. This sector, and the higher education system in the UK is world leading, and it's the envy of the world. It will be the driver of that levelling up agenda, which the government is so kind of obsessed with. If there's one thing that the sector has proven to government is, we deliver on so many levels. From right at the beginning of the pandemic, we've demonstrated that we can keep the show on the road. We can educate the future workforce and can keep doing that. But we have helped at the front line. We've put our nurses, we've put our workforce, we found the vaccine, we've delivered the vaccine. We are out there, we're testing, we are part of the community, and we are the future workforce. But the growth of this country's prosperity, first and foremost, sits with the universities. When we think about our members, they are those large anchor institutions. They are the lifeline, the lifeblood of those communities. Government, if you put at risk that through any policy interventions, the whole apple cart will turn over. I mean, you can point to certain areas of the country where without the university, there is no community. Everything that emanates from that in that community has started with the university. And you can look at aspects of culture, you can look at obviously skills, the workforce, employment, hope and aspiration. It all centres on the university. What I would be saying to officials and to the minister is, do not put that at risk. You should be doing everything you can to protect that and grow it. So don't, do not sort of mess with this, because you really could have some massive unintended consequences.
But Vanessa, you've had enough time working obviously inside government on the other side, and certainly I'm thinking about my own experience previously as a civil servant. Is my fear and worry is, Vanessa's position, our position is absolutely right. We are the engines of growth and innovation and the future workforce and levelling up. But if you were a department that had a certain set of objectives that have been set, then COVID is the moment at which you could potentially, I'm not saying they will, but you could potentially accelerate, because it's been such an unfreezing event. It's been such a disturbing event in the system. If you were being particularly Machiavellian, you would absolutely use that moment to take through change. So I think we have to absolutely continue to lobby. We have to be really, this is raw politics.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I have worked, and I did work at the Department for Education, so I know, and I still know some of the officials that were there when I was there. I mean, I have a huge amount of respect for those officials and the conversations we have. And actually what COVID has proven is that they do want to work with us, because they're neutral, they're civil servants, but they do have their political leaders, as you described, Debra, and that's the danger. And we have to work with them. We have to give them the evidence. I mean, just going back to the roadmap, that really held in the balance. There was a very difficult conversation where they said there is a possibility that no more students can return, because the cabinet are not convinced, that this could be a risk. We found the evidence. My members gave me the evidence to be able to say, we've got the statistics, we've got the evidence, and it's absolutely critical that these students that are on practical practice-based courses in all years can return. And so they took the evidence, they went to cabinet, they fought for us. And I was really surprised. I mean, this is as good as it really could have got in terms of getting that all years back, not just final and completing years.
No, that was, I didn't ever think at any stage that was really on the agenda. So that, all.
Yeah, it was off at one point. I mean, it was really hanging in the balance. So we do feel that the officials are on, they want to make it work. And the universities minister, if we say financially, it's all going to, fall over, that concerns them. That concerns them. But you're right. I mean, there are forces at work here in other parts of government that we have to. We can't be complacent. And it could just come in left of field, and it does come. It's a money question. They'll be looking at figures and thinking we can't afford this, and we need to tell them, why investment into higher education is so important. But they're balancing everything.
But the fundamental it's that mindset as we go towards the CSR, which is this is investment in the nation's future. Every student who goes to university, every piece of research we do is about an investment in the nation. And I worry that it gets reduced so quickly to actually it's all a cost.
Yeah.
This whole generation of people who went to university used to get grants. Never paid. You paid to go to university.
That's me. I left with it. I mean, I'm quite, I'm eternally grateful. But I was that privileged group. It was a very small percentage that went to university when I went, and I left without a penny of debt. I mean, that is everything paid for, grant, no tuition fees. But I was of a very small minority that went. And that's not right. I mean,
more of our people going to university and engaging in a university education at whatever age, I think is a sign of a really thoughtful, careful, civilized country that wants to invest in its people.
Yeah, the most advanced cultures in the world have very high proportion of the population going to university.
Because it's gonna play a massive part in the COVID recovery, isn't it? Universities in general.
Oh, absolutely.
How could that can't be understated, can it?
It can't be understated, and also the world has changed. I mean, I think we've been fortunate. We've had speakers come to speak to our vice chancellors and our teaching and learning groups who have done a lot of the drilling down into future skills needs. And it is quite shocking what, you know, we have got massive shortages in certain areas, and the technical skills space is massive. There's estimates of 100 million new roles by 2025. I mean, that's this next kind of graduating cohort, you know, it is massive. And the place where you're going to get those highly skilled areas is you know, is our universities. And I really think I get a sense that things have really changed out there. You know, employers won't have those vast training budgets. They do not want to take someone on who they then have to retrain. They want job ready graduates that can walk in and hit the ground running. And that is what Alliance universities do. And I think that is one of our strongest values and strongest USPs, is that we deliver the workforce that hit the ground running, whether that's a nurse, a paramedic, a lawyer, a teacher, you know. And then in terms of the technical space, which completely blows my mind, but they can literally work, and those are the areas where there's massive skill shortages. And so that is, you know,
the irony is we do the research that generates, you know, we're the generators of the change itself by the knowledge that we create through research. So, you know, I just think about you know, all across the UAE, but at Brighton, the team who are working on sort of artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, carbon, hydrogen engines, hydrogen fuel, you know, those things, as we build back better, to quote the government, and take a really, really important focus on green, because we have to become carbon zero, then the demands and the skills that we're going to need for the future are going to be really different.
Yeah.
The combustion engine, there'll still be combustion of various types, but you know, when we've got hydrogen batteries, you know, there's impact around the, you know, rare earth metals that you need for batteries and the like. But you know, it's a different workforce, it's a different set of skills, it's a different set of technologies, and they're only going to, it seems to me, increase. I think about, it's really interesting in terms of from healthcare, the role of, suddenly how you get a GP service or a healthcare service is completely different. So, you know, I can email a GP and have an online consultation, and you know, why would you go to the GP service? I mean, there are times obviously when you need to be touched and poked and prodded and all those sorts of things, but a lot of them you don't. I mean, I've always wondered why on earth we do outpatients in hospitals the way we do, because other than filling up hospital car parks, you know, absolutely different ways of engaging and shaping the delivery of healthcare, which allows individual practitioners to practice really differently. So I think there's huge opportunity. What we can't do, the really dreadful thing would be not to learn.
Yeah, and I think that is one area of the government's skills white paper that came out. So there's sort of ambition around this kind of virtuous circle that we could, and lifelong learning, that we all, you know, you never stop learning, and you know, you whether it's at your local college or your local university, and you know, you continuously return. And this, you know, the government has made announcements around sort of a flexible modular approach, and that's something that, as you know, members of the University Alliance, we were used to doing that. I mean, there was just, unfortunately, the government kind of changed things, made it so difficult. But we've always been positioned to do that. That's our heritage, is, you know, enabling the local workforce to upskill, reskill. That's in our DNA, and that's why it's so important. I mean, I think, you know, in the future, I wonder if we'll move much more to a continental model of attending kind of higher education. It is much more local, because of all, you know, the issues that COVID has highlighted. A lot of our members are predominantly commuter. So we have 3 members that it's over 65% of their student cohort commutes. I just think the model will change, and you know, why be obsessed with this residential model when you can have a much more local, fluid community, which then addresses that levelling up kind of agenda, where, you know, people, social mobility has only ever meant, you know, getting to a certain level and then moving to London. That's social mobility in the old world. Well, that's not really social mobility. Social mobility is about being able to learn, upskill locally, stay locally, live locally, get a job that is rewarding, and reinvest locally. It all has to happen in that local community. Qualifying students to then move to London is not much social mobility. So it's about, you know, community, which COVID, I think, has really highlighted. We have community has been the most important. That's the bit that has got us all through this, is community. So
yeah. We're running out of time. We could talk about this for a very long time, I'm sure. Debra, just very quickly, how has all of this impacted how Brighton is looking at its strategy refresh over the next 4 years?
So it's ironic, really, because we had back in November 19 taken to the Board of Governors. November 20, took to the Board of Governors a refresh on our strategy, Practical Wisdom, to set out Brighton 2025. So we've set out our, I hesitate to say the word roadmap now, I have to find another one.
Framework.
We've set out our path. Sorry?
Framework?
It's a path.
Pathfinder.
To 2025, which is, interestingly, no time at all. That's the really scary thing, how many intakes of students is that? So we've set out, in some ways, it's a refinement and an acceleration of practical wisdom. So the, students at the heart, enabling people, great space to work and learn, research, portfolio. It's the same, securing our future, investing in our future. So Brighton 2025 is the path. We're going through a process now of engaging everybody in the conversation. As ever, as you make change, and COVID has accelerated that, it will mean some challenging conversations and some challenging decisions. But that's the nature of leading a university. But we've shown that we can adapt. We can focus, and we've done. We deliver some brilliant education. We do some astonishing research. I was talking to one of our hydrogen researchers the other day, and it's just amazing, absolutely amazing. But we must learn from COVID. What does flexible, agile working look like in the future? What does the use of space and place look like in the future? What does the university experience for a student look like? How do we continue to use the digital technology? We can't just suddenly go, let's turn Teams off. How do we get to carbon zero? If we were really ambitious, we'd get to carbon zero plus. So Brighton 2025 is the plan, and engaging everybody in the work streams is going forward, and that's what I'm accountable to the Board of Governors for.
And then just finally to both of you, what do you want to see the university sector look like over the next few years? Just as a final point. Bit of a broad question, but tell me what you both want most.
Okay, so I can't remember how long my term of office is as the chair of the Universities Alliance, but I have to say I am so pleased that as a University of Brighton we're in a mission group, because you can't do this stuff on your own. It's a team sport, and it's been brilliant. So I will continue to really put my passion and energy into being chair of the UA, and we'll remain members of the UA. And I think we have to be strong about our role as professional, technical, vocational universities, and be deeply proud of that.
And just to add to that, I want the sector to be recognised for what it is, which is world class, and be respected for that. I think it was asked to survive and grow its own income in a sort of marketisation. It did that extremely well, and I think that as a result of that, that's why, despite the challenges, the sector's navigated its way through this and helped government. And I would like it to be recognised and respected for that. I think there needs to be some changes. I think in terms of regulation, it's too much. It's a huge distraction. I think in some respects the sector's thwarted in doing what it really can deliver. There's amazing practices that go on, as Debra described, in terms of the amount of research, the amount of work in the community, the work with business and industry. It's is huge, and government can learn an awful lot from the sector. So rather than sort of trying to beat it up, it should, work with it to really learn, because good investments in the sector can produce amazing results, as has been shown. So it's a real golden egg. So my caution to government, we just be really careful. Don't break the egg, because this is the future. So be careful what you do next, and that's my job to make sure they don't mess with it.
Debra, Vanessa, thank you so much for your time. I think we could have spoken for a lot longer, but you're extremely busy people, so I'll let you go. Thanks again. To our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this 2-part special and found it informative and interesting. Thank you again to Debra and Vanessa, and thanks for listening.